overall, it's a new market for Bitcoin. It's a new cycle. I want to call it a perpetual Bitcoin cycle, one that just keeps going up and down, and over a period of time, it just never stops moving to the upside. And I think we're in that for the next decade at this point, rather than one that comes and goes every 4 years. And I think that's going to be quite interesting to see whether that plays out. I think we've moved past the idea of an omega candle, which is one day you wake up and Bitcoin's just $100,000 higher, and we've moved into the idea of an it's never going to stop candle, right? And so overall, the point I want to make here is that the conversation is now shifting, and the conversation has to shift because the type of buyer that's coming into Bitcoin is very different compared to the type of buyer that has been coming into Bitcoin. There's also wonderful education out there for people who want to actually use the underlying Bitcoin. I think we've reached a potential saturation point in the amount of education that you can have talking about one thing that never really changes, and the beauty of it is that it never really changes. So, it's going to be interesting to see. I want to make you aware, if you're following the markets, like how do markets actually evolve? Well, we've hit a point now where the relevance of Bitcoin education, I believe, and it's a sad state of the world, but I believe that the relevance of Bitcoin education has hit saturation point, right? Because now people will be able to get access to Bitcoin without knowing what Bitcoin actually is, without caring about how it works. And that might be sad for some people, but that's what I believe is going to happen. So I think over the next 10 years, you're going to see Bitcoin adoption climb, right? And by the way, adoption to me is not number of people. Adoption to me is amount of dollars going into Bitcoin, because it is a monetary network, not a human-based network, right? So the amount of dollars going into Bitcoin, the adoption of it based on the amount of pool of dollars that we have is going to go drastically higher. However, the education and the saturation of education and the cycle of knowledge around Bitcoin is going to go down, in my opinion, right? And that's a very, very sad state of affairs. But that's how assets mature. Less people know about equities now than, like, in terms of actual in-depth information. Less people as a percentage know about it now than they did before. Same thing with real estate. There's many more real estate entrepreneurs back in, 20, 30 years ago that had to really figure out stuff. Now you just sort of buy a blueprint and you get to it, right? So actual expertise of data and stuff like that is going to start, in my opinion, start coming down. But the good news is it's on the internet, which means everyone can access it forevermore. So there is going to be a lot of people right now that are pursuing dopamine hits, trying to find the next thing, the next thing, the next country, the next this, the next that. But I want to make you aware of something. It took BlackRock's ETF 48 hours, 2 trading sessions, to accumulate more Bitcoin than El Salvador. Now, that doesn't mean that what El Salvador is doing isn't important. It doesn't mean that the work that El Salvador is doing and the progress that they've had is not important. It is extremely important for the people of El Salvador and Salvadorians around the world. However, in terms of net impact to Bitcoin, I want you to realize that it's already happened. We are already past it. And this is why I've been saying you need to subscribe to this channel, because I don't hear too many people talking about how you can take advantage of these ETFs, how you can take advantage of income opportunities on this ETF, how you can take advantage of borrowing against these ETFs better than borrowing against your Bitcoin, etc., etc. That is now the conversation that's going to become more important over the next, I would say, decade, because the thing, the X factor, the moment, the inflection point, the whatever you want to call it, is already done. That is the American ETFs, whether you like it or not. If you are a self-custody proponent and you absolutely hate the idea of ETFs, cool. It's over. The ETFs are here and they're going to win, because they're going to incentivize more people to use the ETFs than self-custody. And we're seeing that right now. We're seeing retail sell their Bitcoin and move it into the ETF. Hell, my parents themselves said to me that, because they own a bit of both, and they said that they need to generate some liquidity, so we were looking at all the options for that, and they wanted to sell some Bitcoin into this next cycle. And I said, okay, cool, you can sell some of your GBTC position. But as I'm saying this, they stopped me and said, no, we want to sell some of the Bitcoin, we'll leave the GBTC. Because that is how boomers are going to feel safest when it comes to Bitcoin. So for the next 10 years, the moment for Bitcoin has already happened. I know everyone's going to be searching for it. Everyone's going to be making YouTube videos. Everyone's going to be doing Twitter spaces, clubhouse rooms, all this other stuff around. Okay, what's this next thing? There is not going to be a single exciting thing that happens to Bitcoin in the next 10 years that's going to have a bigger impact on Bitcoin than the American ETFs. It is mission accomplished from that perspective. Right now, from my perspective, the only reason I'm still here making videos is because I still think we're at a price point where the average, the average, it's not the average person because they're already priced out, but like the average millionaire, right, can still acquire one Bitcoin and get to that position and protect themselves from the devaluation that's coming. Plus, there's a lot of interplay between Bitcoin and these other assets and things like that, which is the conversation that we need to transform into. But overall, there's going to be a lot of people pursuing excitement. Like, for example, people saying, oh, what happens if Argentina goes onto Bitcoin? Well, let me put it into perspective. Argentina's economy is 480 billion. So to show you exactly how irrelevant that would be to the grand scheme of things, understand that the economy of Miami, I'm not talking about Florida, I'm talking about Miami, is about $480 billion as well. So a whole country that has no real economic footprint going on to Bitcoin, considering Bitcoin's a monetary network, has a bunch of feel-good factors, but from an actual impact perspective, there is none. And remember, you might be judging impact completely differently to how I judge impact, but ultimately Bitcoin is a monetary network, which means impact is based on the amount of dollars that go into it, not the amount of people that know about Bitcoin. Just because you can high-five a happy hippie doesn't mean Bitcoin's gotten any better. In fact, it's probably gotten worse. But ultimately, despite all of this, even though it's changed, even though we've hit the most monumental success factor of Bitcoin, there are always only 3 rules to Bitcoin. Step number 1, you buy Bitcoin. Step number 2, you shut the fuck up. And step number 3, you get fabulously wealthy.